It is online on Facebook. It's queuing up Twitter. It's queuing up YouTube. And we're going to be going live here.
What's
Right.
is it a Gonzaga handle for those social media?
No, it is Leadership Daily. So that's a fantastic question. I just want to start out. We are now live. And I want to say welcome everybody to Leadership Daily. This is focused on the future of leadership, a place for educators, consultants, coaches, students, practitioners, people who are passionate about leadership to share their craft, their stories, their experience. And today we have a special session unboxing Santa's new team with author Trevor M K Airey and illustrator Natalia Starakova. So I'm super excited for this. Trevor, in fact, is a close friend. He's a mountaineer. He's climbed one of the tallest peaks in the 48 states. He's a expert in supply chain and sales and marketing for international companies of the likes of Philips and Amazon. He's a UW grad and also a grad of Gonzaga University's organizational leadership program. So super excited to have him today as we talk about Santa's new team. And I'm really excited for this book because it starts teaching leadership principles at a level that's accessible to everyone. Even I have a 4 and 7-year-old, so I'm really excited for this. So without further ado, we're going to go into a little bit of a guided interview, and then we have a live audience who they have exclusive access to be able to ask questions and interact with a leadership expert, Mr. Trevor Airey. So I'm really excited, and we're going to actually bring up the live video feed now with our colleagues and friends, Dr. Adrian Popa, Mr. Bruce Hough, and we have doctoral student candidate, I believe, Katie Reginato Cascamo. So if I didn't butcher anything there, welcome everybody. Excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So this is going to be just a natural conversation. We've all spent time together, so this makes it really fun. Trevor, I remember we were on Mount Whitney hiking on the trail, and you started talking about this idea.
Yeah.
And so tell us about the origin story of Santa's new team.
So the origin actually starts about 6 years ago. I had just finished my capstone for my master's degree. And at that time, the first of my now 3 children, Deacon, he was 3 months old. And it was literally Christmas Eve. And it was just one of those, it was so weird. I woke up like in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve, wide awake. I have no idea why. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to write this idea down. This is amazing. So I got up at like 11:30 Christmas Eve, 2015, and crept into my office and just started typing away. And my wife at one point woke up and came in and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have this idea. I need to write this down. It's amazing. It's going to be the future of Christmas. And she's like, you're crazy, and went back to bed. And so I basically wrote the story from like 11:30 at night to about 3:30 in the morning until I was just fully exhausted myself of ideas. Went to sleep, woke up around 7, got the baby in the car, packed up my laptop, went to my wife's parents' house, and said, I'm just going to work on this thing in the living room. And basically just went into the living room by myself with my laptop and worked all of Christmas Day. And then after dinner, I read the very first draft to the family, and they're like, "Whoa, that's actually a really cool story. You should publish it." And at that time, I was like, "Well, you're my family. You have to say that." But over the years, I've read it to many people, friends, coworkers, and the vibe that I got from a lot of them, and a lot of them even had kids. They're like, "This is actually a really cool story. Like, you should look into getting this published." And it wasn't until I actually joined Phillips and read it to them, and it was a group of people that they didn't know me. They didn't have to be nice to me. It was probably the most unbiased group of people I read it in front of. And then all of them, like, they kind of sat back in their chairs and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, I think you're actually sitting on something that's pretty cool." So that's when I kind of had the confidence to actually pull the trigger and look into it. I submitted it for copywriting in 2020, the beginning of 2020. And I actually didn't even tell my wife that I did it. I just did it quietly. And within 24 hours of it getting the copyright with the Library of Congress, a publisher reached out and said, "Hey, we want to help you make this a real book and bring it to market." And that publisher will remain nameless because I ultimately didn't go with them. I went with a different publisher. But it's definitely been a journey along the way, and moments of a lot of self-doubt, kind of leading up to that point. And even after I got it copywritten, there were still those moments of doubt until I decided to really kind of pursue this whole publishing thing. And most people know there's kind of the world famous authors that have the big deals, but then there's also a lot of aspiring authors, and the resources that are out there now have there's a lot of self-publishing authors. And we actually were with a couple down in Bend, and one of the good friends met with a self-published author in Bend, and she's actually has a pretty legit career that she's created for herself. So it's at this point in time, it's kind of a little side hustle, but I have a lot of ideas. So this book, although it's kind of a debut book, the question that's been asked is, well, what's the next one? And so, and I already have the next one kind of, the plot is built. So I need to prove this one out. But once it gets proven out, then the next ones are coming.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
So Trevor, if I can just interject, first of all, congratulations. But also number one out of this whole thing is, it's a good thing you just had, a baby at the time that you conceived of this, because otherwise you'd have been up assembling toys and not writing this story. And so,
Exactly.
The fact that your child was so young at the time was a godsend. You'd have never been in the publishing business because it would never have been written.
Exactly.
You'd have been assembling toys. Number two, you have the greatest in-laws in the world to allow you to spend that Christmas day sitting in their living room working on something and not paying attention to them.
Exactly.
So you married great. I know you did that anyway.
I married up for sure.
And I think we can all say that, at least those are the men in the room here. But congratulations, and that is a great story, and kind of jealous, because that's like everyone's aspiration, right? To kind of be published and to do it and to kind of have a story. So you are living the dream, and what I love about your story is you took action. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people have these great ideas, but the difference is you took action, and congratulations on that.
Yeah. And the conversations that we had, down in Whitney, the first time we went and the second time we went, a lot of those conversations that we have on the trail and back at the hotel and at the campground. I mean, those are like mentoring moments, right? Where I can bounce ideas off of you guys. Many times we're like in our most vulnerable state because we're tired, we're, fatigued. But it's been nice to have like this safety net, if you will, of individuals that I can call upon and bounce ideas off of. And I just think, there's a lot to be said of having that support network for sure.
Wow. Bruce, your comments, beautiful. Those are spot on. And I think it really goes together with, you said something that I think while we're unboxing a little bit about the story, we could unpack those as well, is the journey. You talked about having doubts and challenges. Even, you had one publisher and you ended up going with another. And I'm sure there's some background stories, but I think the thing I'm really curious to talk about more is what was that journey of doubt and what I'm perceiving as growth, and how have the mentors and your opportunities with Gonzaga helped influence that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the last mountaineering trip that our team did was this theme of like doing hard things. And when I was talking to my wife about whether or not we wanted to pursue this what I would consider an opportunity, she would consider it a risk. When we were looking at pursuing it, she really grilled me, like pretty aggressively, in terms of, why do you want to do this? And it, for me personally, it didn't really have anything to do with like, I could sell millions of this thing and not have to work a day in my life. Realistically, that's a pipe dream, right? What I really wanted to do when I originally wrote this book was I wanted to create my own version of a legacy for myself. When you look at like Clement C. Moore, who originally wrote the very first story of, A Visit from St. Nick, which is now called 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. When he originally wrote that, it was just kind of like this really cool idea that he wrote and decided to put it in a newspaper, I believe. And that story over the last soon to be 200 years has really shaped the way Christmas is today, right? Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, like all of those reindeer and a lot of the underlying themes with a lot of the Christmas stories that you see in the world today are anchored in that story. And as I was reading the story to my son, there were moments of the story where I'm like, this just doesn't like, when someone tears open the shutters and throws up the sash, like what does that even mean? Right. So I was reading it going, man, like this story could really get an update. And that's where I really kind of landed on, like, the original plan was just to write an updated version of 'Twas the Night that's a little bit more topical and a little bit more modern. And that's so that was the original idea. And then as I started writing it, because I had finished that capstone, and my project actually on my capstone was youth leadership development, specifically at the high school age. That was the focus of my capstone. And the whole idea there was, how do we present these leadership principles, and how do we give them to students, specifically seniors in high school that are getting ready to like go off and do their own thing. So my mind was already there in terms of like, what are these core basic leadership concepts, and how do we get this in front of a younger audience? So it was just kind of the perfect combination of like my critical thinking brain was already in like youth leadership development, but I also had a brand new baby. And so, I'm putting him to bed listening to the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star lullaby version of Wu-Tang Clan. So I was just in a very unique creative spot at the time when I wrote it. So anyway, yeah, hopefully that answers it. But it was just kind of I think like the perfect storm in many ways.
Wow. You mentioned the capstone, which for folks who aren't familiar with, could you tell us a little bit about the capstone in the Gonzaga program?
Yeah. So the capstone is essentially it draws upon all of the various things that you've learned throughout the program. So when you think about all those different classes that you took, the capstone really kind of like pulls everything together. Okay. And it's pretty much kind of a free form. You have to submit, hey, this is my idea, and then once that's approved, then you have to back it up and defend it. And so the concept that I went with is I thought of leadership as a language, where you need to be able to flex your communication upstream and downstream, and that's really effective leaders can do that with relative ease. So that was the idea of the capstone for the youth program. As I said, if we think of leadership as a language, right? Foreign languages, that's one of the core requirements of college. Why not include leadership as an option? Leadership as a language as an option, right? Because in my high school, the leadership class was poster making for the football game. Like that's not leadership. That's arts and crafts.
That's cheerleading.
That's cheerleading, exactly.
Hey, Trevor, that's really interesting that you brought that up, because I think, one of the reasons that I even went back to school at an advanced age was to put language to concepts that I've lived as a professional. It's sort of like, okay, I've had all these experiences and started businesses and done these things and had this sort of intuitive sense of what leadership is and was, and had read and had studied and done it. But one of the things I was really interested in was putting language to it, because once you put words and language to something, then you can describe it, and then you can teach it, and then you can inspire others with it, right? And I think that's kind of what I heard you saying. And the other thing that I think is really critical here is that we live in a world today where words are being redefined. And this is an opportunity at a young age to define words in the context of leadership and the relationships of leadership that will help young people grow into that language, because you're defining it early, and that maybe those definitions will endure and be legacy and not get changed on a whim or a societal idea. It's something that actually has meaning, that is enduring and has legacy. So again, congratulations. I think that's a great part, I think, of what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
That's I think there's a nugget in there that you both, I heard, come out there, and the redefinition or the transformation power of leadership and leadership as a language. And I'm curious to talk about that a little more. Going through the capstone program, organizational leadership program with Gonzaga, like I felt like that was a transformation for me. Like it made such a huge impact on my life. I'm a former high school dropout, and the journey, meeting amazing people like you all, of course, too, and the mentorship and the having to put ideas into actions and learning to speak, learning to put words to the yearnings and feelings I think a lot of people have. A lot of people want to make the world a better place, right? But it's like, how? And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, the concept of youth teaching and leadership, and what can we learn as adults with this opportunity to transform education of leadership?
Absolutely. I'm gonna jot down two things so I make sure I remember to cover these. So I think when we talk about youth leadership, I really kind of think of it as almost like stages in life. So, as a youth entering the world of adulthood, you're entering at the bottom rung of the ladder, right? So you have to, more often than not, when you're entering one of these organizations, you're entering from the bottom. So you have to lead from the bottom up, right? Like, you're not going to be coming in telling people what to do, but you're going to be coming in observing certain things that you do at work, whether it be at a grocery store, in a restaurant, or what have you, where you're like, man, I think this can be better, right? Everyone has those moments in their career where they're like, man, I think this could be better. And that's where I think like servant leadership specifically, if you're 18 or 19 years old can learn some core principles in terms of like, what is servant leadership and how do you execute it? A lot of that comes down to leading by example, asking questions, right? Not coming in saying, well, I think we need to change this, this, and this. And they're going to be like, well, you're 18 years old. You don't even know. Go away. Right. But it's learning how to ask those questions to get those that are higher up in your organization to actually start thinking about, what, maybe there is a better way to do this. Or even how to have tough conversations with your peers, right? When you go off to college, or a fellow coworker who's on the bottom rung. So I think servant leadership is a big one within the youth space. I think the other one, and you're starting to see a lot more of it now, is awareness and empathy. Just yesterday, my kindergarten son, now Deacon, came home and said, "Oh, today we learned about bullying." I'm like, really? Wow. Like that was a concept that like we didn't learn about in kindergarten. We just didn't. And so you're starting to see it at a younger age, this awareness that, bullying is not okay, and this is how to identify it, and this is how to talk about it. So I think those are the two kind of most prominent ones that I'm seeing right now in terms of like youth leadership development. A lot of it's societal, but just that overall awareness and empathy is really exciting to see.
Awesome. You're muted.
Trevor, I only have seen a blurb on your book, and I'm really anxious to, by the way, have you show us some of the artwork as well. But the Christmas story we certainly have the Christian basis of what the story of Christmas is about. My sense is this one is more of the mythology of Santa Claus and working together to make Christmas successful for boys and girls around the world. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think that's sort of the context that you're working on. And you talked about trying to get young people to think about leadership going in, and they say, gee, this could be done better, or this could be better. I think the one thing that people struggle with, especially at that age, is they're thinking about finance and accounting and operations and production and some of the technical skills, programming and coding and these things, which are all important skills for business. They're part of the production what gets done in a business or in any kind of leadership or any kind of business environment. But the leadership side of it really comes down to relationships.
Absolutely.
And so when you think about relationships, and people think of that as the soft part of business, and I always sort of cringe at that, because they talk about the hard science and the soft science of business. The reality is that without the relationships, none of the other skills will help achieve greatness in an organization. You must create the kind of relationships and culture in that organization. And the culture in Santa's kingdom is pretty critical to this kind of to having a successful a Christmas event. And I'm really excited to read it, because I just sense how the direction that you could go with this. I'm sure you have, but the relationships are so key, and I'm guessing that that's a part of what you're talking about in your book. Maybe you could talk about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the story, we'll kind of, that's a great segue, and we kind of dive into pieces of the story. So the premise of the story is that Santa's team of reindeer are getting old, and he needs to retire them and recruit a whole new team. The original story was written in 1823. So come 2023, they'll be 200 years old. That's a long time to be pulling a sleigh. So he essentially goes around the North Pole village and recruits various reindeer. One of the things that I wanted to make sure of is that the team is balanced with boys and girls. So you have 4 male reindeer, 4 female reindeer, and each one of the reindeer is recruited for a very specific reason, right? Like there's a skill or a talent that they bring to the team that's unique, and collectively they create this well-balanced team. There's another famous Bruce Tuckman, who created this model of team development. And the typical kind of process of team development is it's forming and then storming, then norming and performing, right? So forming, everyone's coming together. That's the recruiting phase of the story. And then there's the storming, which is where the reindeer start jockeying for position, right? To figure out like who's going to take the lead role. And then there's the norming, where everyone kind of comes together and starts figuring things out before performing, which is obviously delivering presents on Christmas. So that's kind of the general idea of it from an academic standpoint. But yeah, those were some of the main things I really wanted to kind of sprinkle throughout. Is we have this academic piece, which we can definitely call upon, but there's also pieces of diversity and inclusion. One of the things that when I was building out the characters for the team, there were a number of times where I made like conscious, purposeful decisions. And one of my favorite characters is Pirin. And Pirin is actually named after a Bulgarian mountain range. And she's a power lifter. She is the physically strongest reindeer of all of them. And actually, one of my neighbors who just bought the book, he's reading it last night, kid you not, and he texts me and he goes, "Pirin is the strongest and she's a girl? What?" and I was just like, girls give birth, bro. Like they were the pinnacle of strength in our society. Like, so, I purposely wanted to kind of have that nod to like female empowerment, girl power, having Pirin be the strongest. So she's actually one of my favorite characters. But yeah, the characters themselves, I mean, what I really would love to see is kids that are reading this. The story is written for parents who are reading to their kids, right? So there's going to be words in the book that a little kid might not know, but an adult's gonna be like, that's pretty clever. And what I would love nothing more is to see little kids say, well, my favorite character is Golden, or my favorite character is Titan or Piran. My kids, their personal favorite is Didgeridoo, who's the youngest. But, to see kids start latching on to those characters, because those characters have some really great qualities, right? Like Ruby, she is one of the more intelligent reindeer. She leads a team of scientists. She's the flight engineer. So it's to see kids latch on to like those positive role models, albeit they're reindeer. Once you start latching on to those positive examples, then you start living those positive examples, right? But it starts with that association early.
Wow. It's it's a Christmas story for children. And yet, like, I'm just, as both of you are speaking, I'm just thinking, like, what would have it been like in life having been introduced to those concepts at a younger age? I know that there's been, moments where early in my professional career, I was super frustrated with the team forming and storming and norming and everything. Because it just seemed like, why are we wasting time? Why are we not getting to work? Whereas now, like, I learned that concept going through organizational leadership. And, and it's like, oh, well, no, this is just natural, right?
Yeah.
This is part of the process. Every time somebody new comes onto the team, those relationships have to, we have to refactor them and refigure out how we're relating to each other. And it's like, hey, this is the relationships that are important. And like, there's something I did big circles around it, was who's your favorite character? And I think that's going to be like one of the key things that I want to ask my children, because I'm going to get the book, right? So I know it's a little late at night, especially for those who have children. We have to tuck in. Before we go on to where folks can find out more, I just wanted to open up to around the room. So for any questions that Adrian or Katie or anybody in the live audience has, just curious. It's an open mic, open chat.
Show some pictures. Can you hold up the book a little bit? Yeah.
So
by the way, hats off to Katie for being thematic and wearing the red winter earmuffs. Oh, they're headphones. I thought it's so seasonal, Katie. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So let's see if you guys can see my camera here. So this is the opening scene. So it says the time had come. His team was getting old to find new members, ones as equally bright and bold. And what I had Natalia do in this scene is really kind of create this very geriatric setting, right? So like the reindeer are using walkers. One of them is using a large candy cane as a cane.
You don't want to get too much into ageism. I mean, you got to take into account some of the present company here. And
they're very, very old reindeer. You're a young buck compared to them. I'll show you one of my favorite. So this is Piran. So she's the power lifter.
Oh, nice.
Right here. And she's working out in the North Pole Premier CrossFit Center. So she's crushing it. And then this is Ruby. So this is the team of elves that Ruby oversees. Here it's like a large chemistry project. One of the really cool things that I will show you is North Pole University. So right here. And you'll see down here, established 1823. That was a nod to the original story, right? So there's little things throughout the book that I kind of acknowledge the original story. So I think that's important to do.
Tell us a little bit about your illustrator.
Yeah, so Natalia Starikova is, she's actually a professional illustrator full-time. That is her job. She is incredibly talented. She is a staff illustrator, so she's actually like held on permanent retainer with the publisher, Friesen Press. And so this book was actually, I started working with Friesen last year. And because she was in such high demand, we ended up pushing out the launch of the book to this year. Otherwise, we would have gone live last year with it. So she has a very unique skill set. It's a very whimsical type of illustration. And with children's books, you live and die by the illustrations. I mean, the very first time I read this story to my kids, it was a Word document that I had just like printed out, and I read it to them. And I was so excited. I'm like, okay, Deacon and Dylan, like Daddy's going to read you a story he wrote. And so I read it to them, and they paid attention the whole time. And I was like, so what did you think? And Deacon says, there's no pictures. Right? And so at that point I was like, okay, now I know what matters to kids. But what was interesting is, that the books that the younger kids really latch onto, it's those illustrations, right? It's the vibrant colors, the whimsical settings. That's the stuff that they really latch onto. So that's why I was like, you know what? I'm gonna wait for the illustrator that I want to be available. I don't just want any illustrator. And I'm glad that I waited. So it was kind of a lesson in delayed gratification, for sure. And I think it panned out pretty well. So you can find a lot of her other books that she illustrated. They're also available on Amazon. And some of her stories also have other messages too, about like being proud of who you are and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, she's very talented.
Awesome. That was a good little show and tell there. It makes me, I can't wait to get the book, in fact. I just wanted to, Adrian, Katie, did you have anything on the top of your mind, any questions before we go into where folks can find the book?
Katie,
sure.
you first.
You suggested characteristics of servant leadership, awareness, and empathy. Well, our family celebrates Christmas all year long. What elements of your story can be built all year long?
Oh man. Wow. That's like a professional question. Holy cow. Put me on the spot. So I think
What he meant to say was that my questions were not professional at all.
Bruce sends me a softball, and then we got Katie with like the heat sinker right down the middle. So I think, if for the family members that wanted to celebrate this story or use this example as a year-round kind of thing, you've got Santa, you've got 8 different reindeer, you've got elves. One of the elves is actually also a coach, right? Piran's coach in the weight room. So I think what you could do is you could, grab each one of the reindeer for a different month, and talk about, okay, let's take, the leadoff character is Rudolph. Rudolph was originally introduced in the story back in the 1950s. I want to say it's like 1940s or 50s. And he was just a child reindeer that didn't quite fit in, right, because of his nose. But now he's old enough, and he's got some experience under his belt to kind of lead the team. But I think from that year-round example, it's picking one of the characters, and it's saying, okay, this, Rudolph is all about experience. So how do you grow your experience? It's by trying new things. It's by experiencing the world around you. That's how you get that experience, right? With Piran, she's physically the strongest. Well, how do you become the physically strongest? by working really hard, right? And it's getting up early, it's going to practice. There's another character who is a very studious character, who's incredibly intelligent, and his nose is buried in a book. That's how he's introduced in the story, right? So it highlights the importance of academics. So I think each one of the reindeer, given their talents and their personality, you can pick those as themes for each month. And at the very end of the story, I actually did biographies on each of the reindeer, which was a super late addition. When I originally wrote the story, I came up with the names and for very purposeful reasons. And the characters are alive in my brain, but maybe not necessarily to the reader. So in talking with the publisher, they really encouraged me. They said, you know what, let's create a little biography section on the reindeer in terms of like, what are their strengths? Why were they recruited to the team, right? Kind of provide that additional context. And I think, so between the characters in the book, I think you could probably land on 10 solid months. And then those last 2 months, I would encourage the kid, your child or children, if you had to make your own reindeer, what would the strength be for you? Right? Like, what is that talent that you would bring to the team if Santa needed to recruit an additional reindeer? So,
I think you just developed a website to engage children into this book. So I think you just created that whole concept of the year-round, create your own reindeer. I think you've got an interactive digital platform being formed to help Katie with her deal. By the way, how do we get adopted into Katie's family, who celebrates Christmas all year round?
That's epic.
That's what I wanted. That's awesome. Good for you, Katie.
That's like the coolest family ever. Yeah, we actually have a website. So I will, I'll see if we can put up a section on like how to engage with children and some of the questions that you can ask your kids after reading the story. I think that's a great idea. So we'll add that to the website. Give me through the weekend and we'll get something up on the website. I think that's really cool.
Hey, by the way, just that you talked about recruitment, and that is maybe one of the, in an entrepreneurial business environment especially, but in every kind of business, whether even NGO, recruitment is really the number one thing. You to recruit people who will help create the right culture for your organization. And this, I mean, that story just lends itself perfectly to that, because Santa, he wants the right culture, right, for his organization. And recruitment is, in the real world, huge. Number one thing. If you can't get recruitment right, it's going to hurt you. And you have to take the time, you have to be focused, and you have to be intentional about how you recruit. If you don't do that, the rest of it's not going to matter. I cannot overemphasize recruitment enough. And it sounds like that's a key part of your story, which is awesome, because that is a key part of success in any business enterprise or any enterprise.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the books that we read in the program was Good to Great, right, by Jim Collins. And he talks about the importance of recruiting, getting the right people on the bus, or in this case, getting the right reindeer on the sleigh. So nice. I think that's, it's super important. I think, Bruce, you nailed it. And hopefully this story is kind of a fun, creative way to teach your kids about how to recruit, how to associate with the right individuals in life, right? How to find the strengths in others, and have a real true appreciation for the differences that others have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, I want to make sure to give Adrian time for the mic here. He's been waiting patiently before we get too late into the evening. So Adrian, you've got the mic.
Trev, first of all, kudos to you for the existential courage to move forward. You shared a concept with us on the mountain. you sat in discernment, you heard our feedback, our awe, both ours and your colleagues and your family and so much. But still taking that leap of faith, it takes tremendous courage. So, kudos to you and your wife for, kind of identifying your commitments and how you move forward, recognizing that there will be significant challenges of read writing into you name it, that comes in publishing, and I've been there in other forms. So what's really cool is that you tackle this dimension of demystifying leadership, for our world, and you do it by showing that leadership is for everyone, that leadership is learned, through each character that you even touched on, which is pretty neat to see, in conversations with Bruce and others, that leadership is a relationship, and that leadership is more, it certainly captures the whole person, that it's not just a positional dimension or one, let's call it trait of what we used to believe about leadership, but it's so much about the human mind, the body, and the spirit. So that is so cool. And the way you opened up just your conversation is about legacy. So it's not that, someone is being replaced, but the importance of legacy and the importance of storytelling and the significance of that to the new team, to the new generation, and what that conveys is critical, in the same way that, a sequel for your book can be Santa's new remote team, given our current context of our world, and they're trapped in various parts of the world and they can't, they have to Zoom, for instance, and still deliver packages and work together, and the chain supply is just trapped in Long Beach, on the ocean, so how do you make all this happen, so your creativity, the way you're moving forward with that is just beautiful. So I think it's already a gift to us, and I can't wait to see how it will be for everyone else. So
awesome. Thank you.
That is just beautiful. So I'm gonna make sure to switch over, so folks who are curious to get the book, I'm thinking this is something I could actually use with students, not just children, right? So we actually have a few different places where you can get it. In the chat, on the social media, there's also a sponsored link. I want to make sure to point it out. You don't have to use that. But that actually supports Leadership Daily, a small percentage of the Amazon. And there's also Target, though, Barnes & Nobles. It's on digital copies with Kindle and Google Play, and you can get it from the Friesen Press website. If you're looking for those links as well, they're at www.legendarycreations.com. And so I just want to point that out there. And Trevor, this was just monumental. I have so much to think about, and you captured something that, the future of leadership is so much more than what we thought it used to be in the past, right? The relationships, the team building, the recruitment, teaching everybody the capacity. And I'm just super excited. I'm probably going to be reaching out to you plenty of more so we can talk about leadership. And just on that note, I want to say thank you, everybody, for the live listeners. We've got folks on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, so that's fascinating. That's awesome, right?
Right on.
And we'll make sure to put the link in the chat, and of course you can find them at Target or online if you search for it. Santa's New Team by Trevor M K Airey. So check it out, everybody. And for everybody who joined in on the live session, thank you. It's always good to talk leadership with you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kyle. Have a good one.
Pleasure.
Way to go.
Good
Love
night,
you, brother.
everybody.
Love to you guys. Thanks.
Love you all.
Bye.